Now we got this far last time where we've simply got a degree 1 surface, or a couple of surfaces here, and obviously we need some shape in those, so let's go into cross section editor here and put some Y sections on so we can see the actual profile here. And obviously we're way off the data. I mean, we do know that we're off the data at the top anyway, and that's just because of some design choices that we made, but we need to add some extra CVs here. So I'm going to make this into degree 2, and I have got an alignment here with history on, so this one will also need to be degree 2, so I can query edit that and increase the degree of that as well. And I'll keep the history on. It'll make a bit of a mess of things around here initially, but just let's see how we go. So let's go, and I want to move these CVs in the X direction only, because I looked at this from the front view there, and all of this was on a straight line at the bottom, and so we just want to move those in X. So let's go and pick that hull, and I'm going to move that backwards and forwards in X. And I'm looking at the sections here. We're going to be way off the sections here. I just want to at the top, but maybe we'll bring it back to the data towards the bottom. We're going to have to see how all of this develops, because we're just trying to create something that's similar in design intent to the mesh, but it's going to be in a completely different place. Now the only problem with moving that just in the X direction is that it effectively stretches the distance from here to here versus the distance there. I don't want to really move it up and down, because then we have to look at the front view again and change all of that. So I think what I'll do is I'll move this hull here, I'll move that one downwards, so I'm just moving that in the Z direction. It's moving it way off the data, but then I'm going to move it back in the Z direction, and then back in the X direction rather. So I'm just moving it in X, sometimes in X, sometimes in Z. You can see up there where the cursor is which direction I'm going in, so that's going in the Z direction. I'm just trying to get this spacing more equal at the same time as trying to get the shape similar. Unfortunately, because we are a long way from this, it's going to be pretty tricky, because the original was quite flat, and I've ended up with something that's rather crowned at the minute. Now I could bring this back, maybe bring the whole thing forward. We're sort of having to design this as though we were working from a sketch rather than from a mesh, but this is the problem with working from meshes sometimes, especially because I've changed that top edge so much. I'm actually going to go and bring that body back and just have a look at this, because I don't really want to move this all down, because this is going to be quite a big job to do that. Well, is it? It might be. Might make things easier, but I think when we step back from here, then we're talking about tiny changes really. I think we should just live with it, otherwise we'll endlessly be moving everything around. So it may not be completely ideal, but it's close enough. On this end we've got now degree 2 here, so because we had degree 1 before, that's just a straight line going across there, and of course that's not aligned, so let's go and just align that. So I'm going to put G0 on, I'm going to align it to here, and it's going to be a partial edge of course, and we want position influence of 0, so that CV stays in the same height for the time being. We probably want to change that later, because we've actually moved these down in the Z, and we need to then smooth those all back across there. So let's go into here, and I just want to put a bit more transparency on the mesh, so that we're not looking at those triangles everywhere so much. So you can see that these CVs are sort of dictated by the fact that we've got curvature alignment here. This one is slightly out of kilter there. We'll just bring this point down a bit. Okay, I know what I've done here. It says an active item has construction history. It's not because that point, that I can't move that point with the history on. It's just that I've left hull on rather than single point. So I need to pick that single point. Now it's not a problem. So don't always believe what it says in a way. I mean, it was telling us the right thing, because I was accidentally trying to move the whole hull, and of course that would affect the history, but that point by itself wouldn't. That was just an error on my part. But now this point also is not good at the minute. I'm just going to move that in the X direction, so just make sure I'm picking the right one. And if you remember from last time, we've got this surface coming down at this angle, and then it's going to intersect another surface here. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out, and obviously because we're off the data in so many places, we're going to have to see how that works out. But I think with something like this, if we just isolate that and shade that up, let me look at that from the front, it's not very clear where those two surfaces will intersect, but it's something like a line going across here, and it's very important that we keep that sort of line, I think, more than keeping, especially when we deviate it from the data, we've got to keep that line in the front view, which it is very difficult to see where that is, to be honest, because you can see, you know, it's very, very subtle here, it's somewhere around here, and then over here it's a bit clearer that there's going to be an edge across here. So I think in an area like this, what I would do is throw the surfaces in on here, and then throw a surface in on here, and then see where they cross over. It's going to be a wobbly line, of course, when we do that, but then we can work on smoothing that out and trying to get something like the character of the original. So I'm now going to, and one other comment is that, you know, the gaps are 0.078 at the minute to that curve. Doesn't matter, we can increase the degree of this at a later stage, but as I've said before, we want to keep the number of CVs as low as possible while we're doing any manual work on this. We don't want to be increasing the CVs and giving ourselves more of a headache. There's a lot of things going on here which is very difficult to say, you know, which bit of this scan this mesh should we be respecting here. We've got this section here which is way off, but is that because this is part of this surface, which I suspect it is, or is it just that my surface is in the wrong place? But we'll find out as we develop this. I think the surfaces going back here are going to be so much easier, because once we establish where these surfaces will be, then that will be relatively straightforward to do, and we'll see where that intersects. And because there's a strong angle between the two, that should be relatively smooth. No doubt we'll have to smooth it out a bit. In the center, this surface here, which starts here, disappears to nothing at all. So actually in the center it really doesn't matter. It's pretty much, there's nothing of this surface left in the center. So we've got a lot of freedom about what we do in that area. Right, let's put in this surface down here, or an initial surface, and I'm going to reach for the MS draft as again, and I'm going to use that curve there. So we want to do that in the X direction. Now I've got a draft angle on there. Let's make that 0, so it just goes in the X direction. Absolutely. And I think I'm just going to do that, and then I mean, you could rotate it until the sections are sort of roughly the same. But you see what happens there is when I do that, although it's got closer, it's actually pulled this in. So if I go back to the start and go back to 0 angle, you see this just goes in the X direction. I think that's better to do that, and then we can go and just move the CVs on this side. So we are going to destroy history in this case, but if I do that, then when I look at from the side there, we've still got these going in the X direction. It's just easier to then work with, I think. Let's extend that so it crosses over this area, and I'm going to make this a little bit simpler, so it's 7 7 down there. Let's make it degree 4, say. Actually, I'll make it degree 3. Now that obviously will deviate from that curve. We can get an idea of what that is using the locators there. So it actually says, it's a bit difficult to see, to be honest. Let's get rid of that other locator. I can't actually see what it says. Maybe I haven't got maximum on. I have got maximum on. Oh, there we go, maximum 0.38. So it's quite a long way out, but at least we've got a very simple set of CVs there. Let's take these CVs off so don't get confused with those. And we obviously want a higher degree on here, so let's increase the degree here to 2, and then we can pull this hull in. So I'm just pulling it in the Y direction here. No, I'm not. No, I've got it. It's gone onto normal, and I don't know why that went onto normal. Whether I've done that accidentally, I don't know. But I just want to move it in the Y direction. So I'll ignore what's going on at the top here, and I'll just look at the section going through here and try and get some flavour of that. This is another area where we deviate from the mesh, and so we want to capture the character rather than the absolute position. So it's more important that we have that sort of curvature going on there, and you can see that this is quite flat and then it tightens up. So what we want to do with the spacing of the CVs, currently we've got, this is quite uneven, we've got those two close together and that one is further apart, and so we want to push this one much closer in, because that's the acceleration of curvature that we want is actually flat to tight. So really the spacing should be, this is quite big and then the next one should be quite small. So I'm going to move this whole hull here back in the X direction now. So in side view we're going to keep a nice shape there. Now that's pulling it in towards the data, but it's sort of not quite what we want. So let's pull that out in the X direction. Push that in the X direction. Maybe pull that back in the Y. With a Y and X. So I'm trying to get the spacing here shorter than that one, and trying to get that character as close as we can to the mesh. This will no doubt will need some more CVs to do this, I think. So I'm looking down here. I'm ignoring what's happening up here. So this is, you know, a typical section down in this area. So now we've got what looks like a better spacing in terms of that's small, that's large, and that should give us the sort of thing that we want. I'm going to now increase the degree. We don't, because we haven't done anything to the top bit, we want to be careful about this. Obviously this is going to be quite different up here. Maybe we should, before we do that, let's just pull these points out. So I'm just going to pull individual points out here, and I'm going to try and get a bit closer to the data, say on this section here. So I'm going to pull that one in the Y direction. So I'm thinking about how this is going to look in the side view. Now because I'm pulling that in the Y direction, if I pulled it right out there, you can see that gets very tight, and it's because it's so three-dimensional, we're actually closing up that space far too much. And so we can either pull that in the Y direction and then push it out in the X so that the spacing gets a bit more, it needs to be a bit more uniform up here, to be honest, because that's more of a constant arc type shape. So maybe this point could go back. We'll have to look at the side view to see what this is looking like, but I'm moving it in the X and the Y, bearing in mind that this disappears under this surface here. So this is where it gets, it's tricky, because we don't really know where one surface ends and the other one finishes. So maybe we should be looking at sections down here a bit more than the ones higher up. So again, I'm just moving them in the X and the Y direction here. But that seems to be following the nature, the character of those shapes quite well here. I think we need to extend this a bit further, so I'm going to extend that out that way, because otherwise we're not getting to that corner. When you extend things, of course, it starts to look a bit all over the place, because it exaggerates the spacing that we've got before. And let's have a look at that in the side view, just see what those CVs look like. So they're crossing over. That doesn't mean it's wrong. it just means that we've had to extend this way beyond, and it's going to curve up. So the only thing I can see is that you know, though it might be crossing over, these points look a bit not quite right, that it's sort of zigzagging here. So maybe that point could go further in the X and then bring that one back, push it back towards the back of the car, so that that's more all going one way. We could, this is actually, you know, because we've extended this so far, actually we probably should trim convert this to something that's roughly parallel to this edge. This corner here, there's going to be a blend around, so we can, you know, that'll take care of that area there. Now if I try and put in a line across here, say, then it's obviously going to cross that line, that edge there. This is fine, but it can't just cross here, and I can't trim convert it without extending this edge out. So I need to extend this a little bit further. I'm going to do this, just swing it round and do that, so that we're a bit closer to the sort of shape that we want. And then if I go into the side view, let's go around there, so you can see that's the sort of angle of this edge that we want, really. So I'm just going to put a line in from here, somewhere down here to somewhere down here, and it's just an eyeball job. So let's go into trim convert. It's going to be project, it's going to be view, pick that curve and do that with it. So let's get rid of that curve so it's not confusing us, and I think at this point I'm going to save this model. Let's just shade that up. I'll take the mesh off. So obviously the intersect at the minute is completely wrong. That we actually want that intersect going the other way, but that's because we're not. Neither of the surfaces is very accurate to the mesh at all at the minute. I think what I might do is actually just hide that one, because it's just getting in the way. So what we could do, I think what would be useful probably is, because we sort of straightened up that edge there, it would probably be useful to have a plane to save that view essentially. So if I go into construction, plane, view, and I'll just pick on that edge there, and we'll keep that plane there. So I haven't gone into it, but I just want to keep that plane. So let's go and pick construction. I'll give it a name, so hopefully I'll remember what it is. View F bumper, and we're going to put that onto our planes layer. So all our other planes, they all are switched on. So I'll switch them all off, and then we'll switch that one back on. I may or may not use that, but I can imagine that we can pull our CVs in and out of that plane if we wanted to, which probably would be a sensible thing to do. Now, as I said, I suspected that we probably want a higher degree on here, so we can just get that curving a bit more and keep that flatter there. So let's go and do that. Now we've got to this point. Now you notice that plane has actually got history on it, and we don't want that moving around as I move the surface. So I've got to go and delete the history. It's just one of the quirks of planes that if you attach it to a piece of geometry, it's probably going to have history on it, and it will then move about if you move the geometry, which isn't good usually. So let's increase the degree there to degree 3, and then we can pull these points around. Let's pull that more into the Y direction, so I'm just trying to get that a bit tighter there. And I'm also going to move it in the X. So I'm just going between the left mouse button and the middle mouse button. Of course, this is actually changing the shape of that, but it doesn't matter. It's all out in space anyway, so it really doesn't matter too much. And we can tidy it up with another trim convert if we wanted to. So I'm just trying to get this section in here. Obviously there's a blend there, but we don't want the blend doing too much of the work. You want to start getting it, if you can start getting it curving in there, then you end up with a much better highlight, a set of highlights around that sort of corner. Now this, looking at these CVs here, there's quite an angle between those, and it's very curved compared with the mesh. So we might want to just flatten that a bit by just pushing it out in the Y direction. And likewise with that one, that's quite curved. Let's make that a little bit flatter. Maybe push it back in the X direction as well. When we look at it in side view again, we'll be able to see whether we've got the shape. It's not so much that I'm trying to get exactly to that data there, it's just to capture the character of the original data, which is very flat and then curves up. I mean, if this is it was a clay model and had been refined and refined and refined, and we were taking the scan data from the clay, then we would be trying to get closer to the data, depending on engineering information that might come in and actually conflict with what was on the clay, of course. But in this case, because it is a concept and we're interpreting the original 3D sketch, the FBX file that we started off with. So I'm just seeing if we can get a bit closer. Actually, that's quite a good clue, that section there, as to the fact that we're not close to the data. You can see that section there is not really following that. It peels away too much. So I need to pull that point out in the Y direction so we get a bit closer there. So I'm trying, when you're building a surface like this, you try and keep the CVs as neat and tidy as possible. I mean, in retrospect, I probably should have actually set that CP there and used that, and that would probably keep these a lot tidier. So if I go into that view, I didn't need to do that. As I go into that view, then, and we say that this is the view that we want to look at it from, then if we tidy up the CVs in that direction, and they actually look okay, to be honest. They sort of all curve that way, but we can do a little bit of tidying, maybe slide that along a bit. Now the only problem is the sections change, so the sections update to this plane. But it does mean if we use that plane, and sometimes you find that they're not actually up to date, so it's now very confusing about what's going on here. So let's go into construction editor, and you can see it updated then. Now we're more interested in terms of this plane. We're not actually interested in Z so much as X and Y, and we could actually give it a few more sections here. So we're actually pretty good on the data, to be honest. I think this needs to come in a bit. So let's move. Now we're working in this plane, so I'm going to move this point here in the Z direction of the plane, so it comes in a bit closer to the data there. Probably that section is probably the one we should be looking at. Something like that. So that's pretty close to the data. Deviates from here, but then I think that's because that's the other surface. And so let's just bring that other surface back in. We're going to take the mesh off, Now our intersect between the two, as I said before, is way off. So I think we're close enough with this one that I'm going to stop working on that one and then start working on this one. So we could keep in that plane, I guess. Let's have a look. So that's our left view, top view. We might as well keep in that plane and see how we get on with that. And so the intersect between the two would be very useful to have. So let's go and do that. So we go into Surface Edit and we put the intersect on. And we obviously want history on there. It doesn't really matter whether we put both surfaces on, but I will do. So we've got that on. So now we can start moving this around, and we're trying to get that intersect going across the other way. We're not going to worry about that intersect that's appeared there. That's not important. That's just the fact that the surfaces come together in that area. You're inevitably going to get an intersect appearing there. But the important thing is this intersect needs to sort of go the other way, and it will wash out to nothing eventually, but we'll have to sort of design that as we go along. So let's get our mesh back on. It does admittedly become quite difficult to see what's going on, but I think as we move things around, sometimes just moving things, you can then start to get an idea. We've got to remember that we're in this plane at the minute. I don't know quite whether that's a great idea or not, but I'm going to go with that for the time being. Now the problem we've got along this top edge is it's so different to this mesh that as a result of the wheel arch not being quite the same and various other things, we don't actually have much of an angle at all there. We're starting from this point, and so we're going to end up with this coming in to here hopefully, but it's not going to have that angle. I don't think it's a critical thing. I mean, it's a thing that you would have to discuss with the designer, saying is this super critical as a design intent. So you can see as I pull this point back here, so I'm pulling that in the Z direction of that plane, but the intersect now starts to go where we want it to go. But what we will have to do is we'll get this wobbly looking intersect, and then at some point we're going to design a curve going across there, because I think that is important that we control that. It may not be necessary, depends on what the result is, but usually you get the rough intersect in place, and then you have to design it and control it absolutely. So I'm sort of looking at the shape of these bits up here. I must admit this is confusing, and it's because of the difference between where we are and where the mesh is. It doesn't make it easy at all. So I think probably the angle there is important, because we need an angle break between this lip and the lip going into the bonnet. And if we don't do that, if we brought it too far this way and ended up with too shallow an angle there, then that probably would look wrong. So I think it's better to keep that sort of angle to some extent. Now as we get into the center, we've got more flexibility to a certain extent about exactly where that's going to be. I'm just going to do a query edit on here because I just noticed something. So you see that CV doesn't join up, and that's because I've left position influence of 0 on, so I need to make that 1, and then we get a more accurate result, which is important, and our CVs join up, which is also important. So there's our intersect going through here, and I really want to bring this down here, and I can see on this surface here that it's digging way into here. So I'm going to see if we can move that point, because we've got history on here with the align, we want to bring this out, and also this one here. So I'm moving in the Z of the plane that we're currently in, just to see if I can bring that intersect down at all. I sort of I think on the original it sort of looks like it disappears in here, rather than it's rather high where it is at the minute. So I can't just grab hold of that point because that's influenced by the curvature alignment here, but maybe I can. So if I pull that way, then it pulls this way, makes that intersect closer to where I want it to be, but the trouble is with that is moving that too far off that data, I think. It's horrible, to be honest. This is horrible because yeah, I'd really like that top edge to be closer to the data, but it's without a lot of rework, it's not going to happen. So you have to sometimes dig yourself out of a bit of a hole. Let's put a bit of mouse sensitivity on there, slow it down a bit. So I can see when I do that, then it brings that intersect down a bit. Because there's only a shallow angle between there, this is really going to wash out to nothing, and so it's not like this is a crisp intersect where you're going to have a very tight fillet, which would be very noticeable if it was doing something weird. It's going to wash out, but at the same time I don't think that's the right shape of it at all. It sort of looks about the right position there, maybe. Let's see if I move that point there, whether I can. I think I'm sort of stuck with where that is there, so maybe I need to raise that up a little bit by pulling these points out. So I think I do have to do this sort of thing. There is going to be a little bit of a difference when we try and align these things exactly. I think it's going to be something like that, to be honest. Obviously this intersect going up there, that doesn't look right at all, and cannot be right. So I'm going to save this. I think the time may be coming soon where I need to actually take more control of this. So rather than having it intersect doing whatever it's doing with two surfaces which are unrelated, my plan is to take this surface, put in the line that we want in terms of the intersect, trim convert it, and then align it in G0 to this underlying block here. Let's just take that mesh off, because in a way we're into the realm of making it up. And it's often easier if you've just got a sketch to work from, because you can say, well, that's exactly what the sketch looks like. Whereas with a mesh, you can quite clearly see it's not exactly what the mesh looks like. But now, I wonder if we move this point up here a little bit, that might help. Just lift that up a little bit. I'm not worried about these microscopic angles. Those things you can just sort out, you know, the last. You don't need to worry about those at this point. I mean, the spacing of the CVs going around here isn't very good, because there's a big spacing here and then it sort of tightens up. So really, I should be pushing these down this way. Obviously, that's going to change the shape. And well, I say that actually this has obviously been taken from this curve here, and that is exactly what that curve did. So that's what we worked with. So we do have to stick with that, to be honest. So because that's like that, then these points need to be like that. And I suppose it does make sense because it's sort of tighter here and flatter here, and makes some sense. I'm trying to persuade myself that it does. CVs, when you look from that angle, don't look great because the angles on these are not very consistent. It's a tricky little area, this, I can safely say. So I've gone into that plane now. I'm just trying to work out what we can do here. So I don't like these CVs doing that. This edge is probably may well be okay. I think it's just that one doesn't look quite in tune with this. And when you look back over here, that edge, that line, these lines don't quite look right. So I'm going to go and just move that point there. I don't want to slide on. I want X, Y, Z, and I'm going to move that in the Z direction of the plane I'm in. So I'm looking at what this is doing in terms of those lines there, and then but also equally this point. So this is looking a bit better now. It sort of looks like it's more placed in the center of that, from that angle. So let's have a look at it from there, from the Z direction of that plane. It sort of looks okay-ish. Maybe that point could come down a little bit just using slide. So that point there I'm talking about, just move that down a bit, just so that these CVs do something a bit more sensible. I'm going to now save that again. And what I'm now going to do, as I said, is to trim convert this surface back to a line, and I've got to decide what that line looks like. So let's go into mesh once more. Now, to me, the intersect that we've got, so I've got this surface that goes down here, this one here, and that top edge isn't necessarily in the right place. I know we're not aligned here in G0, so maybe we should do that first of all. Let's go and make those absolutely 100% aligned in G0. Same with the top one, because that'll change this intersect. That intersect should come to that corner, I think. Right, let's go and do an align. So I'll put G0 on into here. Don't really want history on. I might have history on already, I'm not sure. That's not going to be a partial edge. So it says the maximum is 0.02. I'm going to put position influence of 0 on. Doesn't move the CVs too much. You can see the CVs internally move a bit. I mean, I'll probably have to put, I should put that on at 1 once I bring the degree up to sufficient. So we'll make that 4, 5. And you can see the gaps come right down. If I make that position influence of 1, then we actually get to 0 now. So it's really a question of, do these CVs go pretty much straight across, which they do, more or less. They're slightly different, but it doesn't matter. That's fine. And then we'll also do the same thing on this one. So this one's going to be a partial edge. In fact, we've already got history on that, so let's go make sure that's right on the end there, and we just need to increase the degree. Now I've got, that's interesting, I'm going to revert that. Hopefully we get back to where we were. Oh, because of history it's reverted right back to a state way before. I'm not quite sure what it's done there, whether I had G2 on. It didn't look like I had G2 on. Let me just go and align it to the curve. Now that seems to have messed up massively. It's just because partial's gone off. But our intersect has gone a long way off, and I'm not quite sure what's happened there. It seems to have lost the curvature on this end completely, which is very strange. So no doubt I did something silly, which you probably spot, but I can't see because I'm too engrossed in the detail. So I'm just bringing back curvature. I'm going to increase the degree again to 3. And on this one we want history on. If this is all gone very badly wrong, then I should just go back to the previous model. Our CVs there don't look. I think I am going to go back to the previous model, so I'm going to save this again. I don't quite know what happened there. It's one of those things where you're so busy looking at one area that you don't spot that something very silly has happened before it's too late. Well, that's my experience anyway. So let's go and open up recent. So we'll go back to the previous model there, and we'll keep this one. So this is the one where it looked reasonably sensible. So I'm going to just take that surface there, Control C, go into my stages, switch off the other one because I don't want to see it. We'll go back into the model where we're having a problem. I want to get rid of these curves on surface because those aren't relevant. And some planes seem to have appeared from nowhere as well. Okay. So that was the only one we're interested in. Don't really understand why those suddenly appeared. Right, so let's go and paste. So we want to paste it into the current layer. I'm not sure what the current layer was, but bumper front, that's fine. And you notice there's a curve on surface there which is actually left from the previous model. So let's go back into there. Hang on a minute, what's going on? Ah, I seem to have messed up a bit, big time here. So I've still got this model. Let me just try and sort this out. I don't know what I've done wrong here, if anything. So that was the surface we wanted. So it's just one surface, one picked surface, and then I've done the Control C, and we'll go back into the editor. I'm going to reopen that file. I don't quite know what is happening here, whether it's something the system's doing. It's probably not, so I'd like to think it is, but so I'm going to delete that one that we were in, delete the selected stage. So this is the one where that was okay, and then I'm going to open recent. I'm going to open this one, 1139, keep this one. Now we've got one surface here, so just checking up there, one surface here, one surface here. So let me just make sure we've got 3 surfaces. Yep. So I'm going to delete this one, and we also want to delete the curves on surface in here because those are going to be stale. And then we should be able to do edit, paste, creation layer, and then let's just check 3 picked surfaces. Great, that's what we wanted. So I've no idea how those duplicates came into play, but maybe if I look back through the video I'll find out. Okay, so we want to align that. We've got position influence of 1 on, we've got edge on, we've got create history on. We want to get rid of this curve on surface because that's out of date. And so I'm now going to pick that surface there, surface edit, intersect on both surfaces with history, into there. So that's looking like it did before, and we'll just get rid of that for the time being. Probably worth just saving this once more, just making sure. You can see why I save regularly, because I find it very easy to make mistakes anyway. So we got that curve on surface there, so that's got history on it. Now I've got this aligned in G0 here. I need to do the same thing on this upper one, so let's go into align. This is going to be G0 partial, and we'll do that alignment here. So that one, I'm going to pick the curve so they're all aligned to the same thing, and I've got no blending on or anything like that. So this is much more sensible. Now the intersect is looking not much different to how it was before. It's probably just changed a little bit. If I close that gap up by putting on degree 3, maybe, so degree 3's done it. So the intersect actually comes up to here still, and it will be because of actually the angle coming off this corner is not quite the same of those two surfaces. Seem to have lost all my sections as well. Let's go and bring those back. So those have come back. Not that they matter too much, to be honest, probably just more confusion, to be honest. So I want this intersect to come to this corner, I think, and so I'm going to just move that point. Now am I in this plane? No, I'm not. That's because I've been saving and moving about, so I just want to make sure I'm in that plane. And so at least we're consistent, even if it's not the best plane in the world, but it may not be appropriate for everything, but we'll go with it. So this point I'm going to move in the Z direction of that plane, so that hopefully that intersect comes down towards that corner. Not expecting it to be 100% on that corner. I mean, actually, if you bring it down further, it does do that. And looking at the mesh, that's probably more like where it should be, I think, in terms of that brown section line coming down to here. What happens if I bring it down further? Yeah, something like that would do fine. As I say, over here, well, we haven't been able to do much with this surface. It has been a bit difficult, to be honest, to get that surface to help us much. But maybe we can obviously affect this intersect with this surface as well. Now we are very close to that data, although that's difficult to make out with these sections because they've not updated properly. So let's bring those back on. So around here we're close to that data. Up here this surface actually disappears completely, and so there's some freedom to move these points around. As long as we don't affect these sections too much, we can do that, and certainly the top edge, and that will help that that intersect there. Something like that. This point could also be moved if it's going to help. As I say, I'm going to probably, I might not actually do a trim convert. It depends on if this works out to give us a decent line here, which we are going to put a soft blend over the top of, then that's absolutely fine, you know. But in other circumstances I would be doing a trim convert and designing that line, but maybe we won't need to do that here. Let's have a look and see how we're getting on. Maybe we could pull that point out a bit. I'm just thinking of straightening it up. Not that there's any rule that says that it's got to be straight, of course. It's probably a case of putting the blend in and seeing what the result is in some ways. So I'm just trying to get that a bit straighter. But there's nothing to say that it has to be straight at all. It's just but I'm looking at the sections here, you know, going through there and thinking actually that needs to go to get at the blend. The thing is with this blend, we want it G2. We're going to be matching it in G2 to the main surface, but at the moment this surface goes all that way. It's all convex, and really we should actually be trying to get it to start to go either completely flat or start to curve the other way ideally, at the same time as getting that intersect to do the right thing. That would be the perfect scenario. I'm going to just do this where I'm changing the pick box size because it's annoying me that every time I try and pick I'm missing it. This one actually is probably about as far as it can go because it's on the section there. What we want to do there probably is to flatten that section out so that we can feed into that blend. And I'm keeping an eye on the section, but also keeping an eye on this intersect. So I'm really trying to get this to start S-ing, in fact. So this one actually, difficult to see the CV there, but there's the CV there. So that's starting to, that's S-ing, in fact, which is what we want really, because that point has dipped below the line, the imaginary line that joins those two together. The same with that one. It is actually doing the right thing. I'm always moving this in the Z direction, by the way, of this plane. So I'm always using the right mouse button there. So if I'm pulling that one that far, then it probably means that I've got to pull that one down a bit as well. So it's sort of just trying to get this sort of character, a hint of that character starting in the block surface, because then when we put the blend on, the blend will be much nicer then. Yeah, the way I've got this washing out, when I look at this data again, it's actually a little, it's the data is showing that line higher up. I mean, we're higher than where it is, but it's just probably about there is where the intersect is. This point is probably a bit lower on the data, but I think we're so far off that top edge we can almost do what we want to some extent. But you always want to respect the design intent, of course, but as much as you possibly can. I think I'm just going to go with that. I know that's not that's a bit of a wobbly line at the minute, but let's just go and isolate that, and I'll take all of the sections off because we want to just have a look at that and see whether the CVs look reasonably tidy. So they look really very tidy in that view. They should do, because I've only been moving them in the Z direction. So so this is in a different direction. You can see that is a bit uneven there. And so before I do this, I'm just going to save this once more. Now, of course, I'm not looking at any data when I'm looking at the CVs, but I do know that I'm going to move these points only in the Z direction, and we know that this has to S, so we know that there should be a little bit of a hook on the end there, so we want to maintain that, but at the same time it looks a bit untidy around here. This is sort of a bit lumpy in terms of the CVs. Obviously the lumpiness of the CVs doesn't mean that the surfaces are necessarily lumpy, because the CVs are an exaggeration really of what's going on in the surface. So if the CVs are super smooth, then you know your surface is going to be wonderful. Why? There's a good chance. So I just wanted to make those a bit more parallel, so I've moved that one down a bit, and that one up a bit. So when you look at the line there, going from there through to here, they progress in a certain way. Now when I look at it from a different angle, of course we probably get a different view on that. So that one's really difficult to see. I'm going to rotate that slightly down. So there is a twist in it, but that's not an issue, because you know you're going from a condition up here to a completely different condition down there, and so I think that looks okay pretty much. Maybe that point, you know, could be a little bit more that way, and maybe having moved one way, it's always good to move another one the opposite direction. It means that area hasn't really moved in terms of deviation much. This also looks a bit like that point maybe goes that way a bit. I'm fussing now, so let's just go back to the top view. Nothing should have changed because I've been moving points in the Z. Let's go back to this one, just have another look at that. That doesn't look too bad at all. Right, let's stop worrying about that now and have a look at that. So we'll take the mesh off. So this is what we've got here, and my planes seem to have switched themselves on again. So I'm just going to switch them all off. Again, I'm not quite sure why that is, whether it's just because I've been backwards and forwards to them all. Let me just have that one on. Let's save that. So this is a bit essy, this shape. I'm just going to see what happens if I do a trim convert. I don't want to trim convert with that line though. I want a straighter line in there. I might decide that this isn't a good idea. I might just go with what I've got. But if we put in a straight line between that point, now when we get to this point, this end, you'll find that intersect does this, which is very common. It just curves around. It doesn't actually get to where you think it's going to go. So let's just put a point on there, on the edge, something like that. This point here, I'm just going to move that one. Going to move that around. Try and do a best fit to that curve on surface. Now I'm going to delete the curves on surface, so there's two of them, so hence I drag the window. I'm just going to actually make sure, yeah, I think there might be a curve on surface on the edge, because you can see if I go into here it says 3 picked curves on surface. It's because that edge is identical to the two surfaces. It's aligned to the same curve, so it's going to be identical. So there's curves on surface there which can catch you out, and so I want to delete those. So what I'm going to do is use this line. I'm going to project that line onto this surface. In fact I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do a trim convert first of all. So let's do a trim convert, project in that view. I think I'll say keep originals on, just in case this goes horribly wrong. It just saves me having to go into the other file to find it. That actually looks very respectable in terms of CVs. So this one I'm just going to make into a template, so I'm using Control T, which is my shortcut for that. Obviously that's not in exactly the same place, you know, there's going to be a gap between that edge. Let's get rid of this curve so that doesn't confuse us. But if I go into locators and I measure between that curve and that surface that's underlined, there is going to be a gap. So it's actually quite a big gap, 1.47. Inevitably, because I've trim converted it to something that wasn't the actual intersect. If I trim converted it accurately to the intersect, then we'd expect that to be pretty small, if not, you know, within tolerance. But in this case, it's not going to be. So now I want to align this. I'm going to do a G0. I'm going to project it onto that surface in the view, or we can use plane because we're in the view and the plane are the same here. So I'm just going to align that to there. Now that hasn't done it, has it? So what did I do wrong there? So I've got project on, so I said that. into there. Let me just get rid of the history on there. Is there history on there? There is history on there. That's strange. Okay, so let's align this, project that onto there. Align failed. Okay, I didn't spot that. Align failed with error 3, projection failure. And the reason for this, and it's not very obvious at all, is that that edge is overlapping the underlying surface. It doesn't look like it is, but it must be slightly off in that corner. And if it was out here, it would be obvious, but where it is at the minute, it's not obvious. So if that happens, then what you have to do is then you have to project that edge on as a curve on surface. So has this resulted in history then, I wonder? So if I try and delete the history, yes. So that was why it resulted in history, even though I didn't think I had history on, to be honest. So I'm going to now project that on as a curve on surface here. So I'll go into surface edit. I'm going to go and project. So curve on surface, make sure it's on view or plane or Z rather, would do the trick here. So this is the thing I want to project on, and this is what I want to project. So there's my curve on surface now. So for some reason that will let you do it, the project will, but align doesn't if it's overlapping. So let's go into align. So now we've got to go and revert. I hope this hasn't messed it all up. That's what caught me out. I think I must have had that selected before. Let me just check whether it's very easy to have something selected and not realise. That is slightly different. That's slightly worrying, but it looks as though everything's okay. Apart from that's a slightly larger gap now, which is odd. I think I'm going to delete the history off there because yeah, I'll delete the history off there because it seems to be, I seem to be regularly accidentally doing things with that which I don't intend to. So let me go into align. So I'm going to make that G0. So obviously at this stage I had that surface picked, which I hadn't realised, I hadn't spotted it. So no, I haven't got it. If in doubt, pick nothing, of course, is the solution. But so let's go G0 onto there, and then I'm going to do that to that edge. Now if I leave 1 on, you can see it screws up the CVs, it's moving them too much. So I want to take that off. But when we do this, not surprisingly, because this is quite a complex surface, it's not 100%, there's 0.7 of a mil there, so we'll have to increase the degree here. It doesn't have to be absolutely 0 because we're going to put blend over the top of it, and as long as it's reasonably close, I mean this is within 0.1 of a mil, so I would say in this circumstance this is reasonably close. We could try just increasing, well let's just put that up to 1, which obviously does the trick. But I'll take it down there. Oh, the other option in fact, because I think when we had it on 3 and I had this on 1, it was also, no, it wasn't quite matched, it was 0.005, but we could do that and then put blending on, and then we'd go for extra rows, so we'd just blend it all the way down to that point, say. We're very, very close here, but we've had to move the CVs quite a long way. I don't know whether that's going to cause a massive issue in terms of shape. We could bump the degree up. I could also put blend on the next row as well, so that, and we'll just see what we get with that, see whether that's any good. So let me bring back the mesh, and then we'll put our sections on. So I think that looks fine. You could say this is slightly more curved than the original. We could tease some of that out there because we've only just aligned that in position there. We could make that a little bit flatter there, and it's probably, it might have changed slightly because I've moved the CVs across, but we'll go with that. So I'm going to move some points here. Now of course we've got a higher degree here, so this means that we have got a little bit more work to do. In this case, let's just save that again. I just like to flatten that out a little bit. I just feel it's a bit too curved. So we've got XYZ on and single CVs. So it's going to be maybe moving that point in. Put 1 on. Now I'm wondering, of course we've got history on, haven't we? So because I've got history on, I was thinking, why is that CV not moving? It's because we've got history on, because I put blend on. So that means all of these CVs are affected, and therefore nothing's going to move. So I've got to delete the construction history and then move from this point. I think what I will look at actually is just where we were on the original. So there was our template of the original. So we're only marginally different. So the templated one, which is that big one, is there. You can see it's a little bit flatter, and I think that's the only difference really between the two. Having saved that, I'm just going to delete that one, so we don't really need that in the way anymore. This worked out, seems to have worked out remarkably well with the trim convert, because sometimes it doesn't, you find it changes everything too much. So just try and flatten this bit. So it's trying to get those 3 points there more in a straight line. But of course it's not just one of these, you've got to look at the other one. So this one next to it is very curved. This one is also slightly curved. So to get them in a straight line, can't move this edge, because that should be G0 continuous. I think I should check that actually, just to make sure that's not moved, because when I did the blend it could affect that edge. It has affected that edge slightly, so let's go into Object Edit and align G0 edge. Don't want history on, I just want to make sure that that's aligned to there. Now I've got to have partial on. You see that it's opened up a huge gap at the top because it's gone right to the top corner. If I put partial on, and it's also opened up a bit of a gap, and the reason being there is because I've got blending on, which I left on from last time. That's part of the reason. Did we have position influence of 1 on? Let's take that down to there. The gap there is neither here nor there. It's 0.014. That's the top, along the top edge. This is changed it a little bit because that corner obviously wasn't quite on there. So let's go back to here. I haven't got history on, otherwise this would be fighting itself. So I'm just going to see if we can align that there on the top edge as well. It's telling me there's a gap there of 0.014. Now why is that happening? It might be that maybe this edge isn't quite on, that I thought it was and it wasn't. It's because maybe because I've opened old files up and gone backwards and forwards. Let's just see if that's aligned, which it is now. I'll put that on 0. Yes, maybe that wasn't aligned, and let's just align that again with partial on. So I haven't got history on any of this. It's not that this absolutely needs solving, because those distances along there are so microscopic. It's just a little bit unexpected, really. A little gap there. Why is that? Maybe the other possibility, of course, is that it's done it now. I have got quite a low degree on there relative to that curve. The curve is degree 7, I think. So yeah. So I'm just going to flatten these off a little bit more. So these are moving in the Z direction. That's actually cutting in a bit to the data, which I definitely don't want that to happen. So let's just straighten that out. We don't want it going back on itself there. You can see I don't often, I can put curvature on, of course, but I don't tend to put the analysis tools on very often, because you can learn so much from just the CVs. So I'm looking at the straightness of these CVs. They look pretty straight, and this one's a bit more curved, but that's okay because it seems to be. I'm going to flatten it off a little bit because it'll all help down here. Do that, something like that. So that's a bit more in tune with the character of the scan data there. And as we've done many times before, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to isolate that. So I think, well, I obviously picked CV rather than surface there. Isolate that, take the sections off, just have a look at that from various views, just see that the CVs aren't doing anything silly. Well, they are doing something a bit silly there by the looks of things. They sort of go up and down quite a lot there. Let's just bring things back here. We've got the mesh on there. We'll have to put the sections back on. It's not that it's doing something silly, it's that just that as we develop the shape, we've put an S shape in there just to try and get this blend to work a bit better. And so we're going to have this sort of SE look to the thing. So that's okay. But there's no reason for this one to be below. This one doesn't look like it's really in tune with the ones around it. So let's just tidy that up a little bit. Maybe that one could come down a little touch. But that general S shape is very weird looking, but it is covering a lot of surface conditions there. And then let's have a look around some other angles. Going across that way, that looks okay. Of course, this is the SE bit again. Rotate that down. Look at it from lots of different angles. That looks okay, considering the shape it's supposed to be, complexity of the shape. So we've got all of this aligned in here. That's aligned there. That's aligned there. And so the next stage is, I think, is to get the other block surfaces in. And so I think I'll leave that till next time.